Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. One thing that seems to have sort of missed everybody, and it's something I haven't even spoken about much either, is there's this perception or this insistence that why didn't he just get a divorce? You know, instead of this murder, instead of the destruction of these precious lives, why didn't he just get a divorce? And I hope people aren't still asking that question 2 years later. I really hope people aren't asking that question. Because if you're still asking that question, it means you don't know the people involved, you don't know the dynamics involved, and you have no idea what the extent and scale and scope was of certain of the details. I'm not going to go into that in too much detail. The focus of episode 21, I hope you like the new design. There'll be another update to that design once it goes on Patreon on the 25th. But what I want to, just before we go into today's episode, what I just want to emphasize with you guys is people seem to think marriage is a fairy tale. They seem to think that before they get married, and some people persist in thinking that when they are married, they seem to want to tell others that they're living a fairy tale. And the same applies in this case to divorce. Why didn't they just get a divorce? A divorce would have been a fairy tale. You just happily get divorced and you live happily ever after. Divorce is a happy time. It's a moment where you break free and you regain your freedom and everyone gets what they want, and that's also a fairy tale. Marriage is a fairy tale and divorce is also a fairy tale. Actually, no. Marriage can be a nightmare. Divorce can also be a nightmare. Divorce can be the worst part of the nightmare of marriage. And so what I think is not being acknowledged in the Watts case, because there was no divorce, because there's no court case, because all we have is this sort of huge banner of Shanann social media flapping in the wind. This huge, colorful banner. You know, Shanann's no longer with us. Shanann has died. Her children are no longer with us. They've died. But yet what persists are all of these photos of smiling people. And for me, one of the craziest aspects of the Watts case is that people, even today, 2 years later, look at those images and they say, no, that was reality. That, what you saw on Facebook, that was real. They were a happy family. Everything was fine. And I'm not going to make the case in too much detail to say things weren't fine, but I can guarantee you, if there was a divorce, you would have seen things that weren't very pretty. I think both Chris Watts and Shanann would have expected some pushback from one another, given the situation they were both in, if there had been a divorce. So without painting too detailed a painting, I simply just want to stress that the Chris Watts marriage wasn't a fairy tale, and if they'd gotten divorced, that wouldn't have been a fairy tale either. It would have been a nightmare. And that's not to say that Chris Watts was angling towards a fairy tale. He wanted a fairy tale ending for himself. He wanted a fairy tale. Nicole Kessinger also wanted a fairy tale. Shanann also wanted a fairy tale. Shanann's fairy tale, to a very large extent, was having children. She kind of got what she wanted until she didn't. Nicole Kessinger seemed to be looking at the Watts family with envious eyes and saying, I want that. I want the fairy tale. I want the house. I want the children. I want the happy smiles. That's what I want. She kind of looked at Watts and kind of thought, well, maybe I can have what you had. Maybe we can just... But she didn't want it second hand. Her fairy tale was she wanted kind of an original fairy tale, but it wasn't kind of working out for her. And what I've stressed in my books, and maybe to some extent on the blog, is when you are fixated or obsessed with a fairy tale, when you just want something better than what you have, also when you're lying, when you're saying things are better than they really are. When I'm talking about Chris Watts saying, no, I think they just vanished. His sermon on the porch, what he was saying to Code in the beginning. No, I've no idea what's going on. He's not admitting the affair. He's not admitting anything. Meanwhile, under that veneer, under that facade, he'd actually murdered his family. Under the fairy tale, under the fairy story, is a nightmare. And so one of the lessons of this case is don't believe in fairy stories. Try to keep it real. Try to be realistic about yourself. Try to be realistic about somebody else. And when things aren't realistic, change, adapt, stop doing what you're doing. Okay, so with that being said, let's get to July 21st, which was 2 years ago today, and let's deal with the social media of Shanann on that particular day and what was kind of going on in their respective lives. Very, very different. Very, very different what the one part of the couple was doing in North Carolina and what the other was doing in Colorado. And this kind of shows what they each wanted for themselves and just how different it was. And we're going to deal with that now in a moment. Before we get there, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Like, share, leave a comment. And let's get started. So the 21st of July 2018 was the 12-week milestone of Shanann's pregnancy, which also gives us a unfortunate milestone that this was literally 3 weeks prior to her death, the death of Nico and the two children, the two daughters. Obviously, at this point, not that anyone could ever see any of this written in the tea leaves, but on this particular day, I really think, it was like everybody was off on their own having fun in a way. Shanann was doing what she enjoyed. Chris Watts was doing what he enjoyed, and Kessinger was with someone she enjoyed. It was a Saturday. July 21st was a Saturday, and Shanann put up this image on her Facebook page, and it's basically the image of her first trimester, and I think she's trying to show that the baby would be as big as a lemon, but not very big. And Shanann is sort of showing herself in profile, that there's a little bit of a baby bump, and smiling. Now, many have speculated whether Nicole Kessinger saw this image or others like it. In the noise of Thrive crap, they would be hard to spot, and it took me a long time to find this one. So just to be clear, when I was researching this particular story, this part of the timeline, and trying to find the material for this blog post as well, I was aware of this particular image. There's another one as well, I think where Shanann's 15 weeks. But I was trying to find this particular image and I just couldn't find it. And the reason is because it's wall-to-wall thrivers telling their story, wall-to-wall people putting up pictures of themselves. It's not a picture of Shanann, it's not a picture of Chris Watts, it's not a picture of their children, it's not a picture of family members, it's complete strangers telling their sort of weight loss stories, and there's a lot of it. It's almost, sometimes it's every single day, lots of stories. Now, this is what makes Shanann's social media not necessarily unique, but obviously different to a lot of people. How many people do you know that put up lots of posts about like complete strangers, about their stories and all that kind of thing. So I needed to find information, and yet I found this exceedingly tedious. It sucked up a lot of time. You don't want to skip through the timeline, but you've also now forced to go through photo after photo after photo after photo after photo. And this is my Thrive story after, this is my Thrive story after, this is my Thrive story. And when you've seen one, you've seen them all. And there may be some people who say, no, I really don't mind going through that. I can really keep clicking away. I can spend half an hour, snooping around. Not everybody can. Some people have got day jobs. Some people have less time on their hands. And as it turned out, the day Shanann reached 12 weeks coincided with a Thrive local event. According to Shanann's Thrive badge, she was a 80k VIP promoter, and this is also part of Shanann's bio on Facebook, which is the second highest ranking. Eddie was at 200k. So between 1 and 3 p.m. we know exactly where Shanann was. She was at a Moore County local. It was not just Shanann, it was also Eddie Maloney, Michelle Davis, Chris Miller, Sandra Miller, Carolyn Haas, and Sue-Ann Jones. They were sort of, I guess, headlining it, right? And you could sort of see on the sort of promotional material that Eddie was by far the biggest promoter of that group. Then Shanann was next at 80,000, and then everyone else was sort of not particularly high up in the sort of rankings. Michelle Davis was at 12k, Chris Miller was at 12k. I'm not quite sure what the other three were at. But there was quite a large group of people. It appears to be about, say, 20 people, and you know, I don't know what you think when you look at the people there. What do you see? Are they young people? Are they sort of fit people? Are they attractive people? Can you sort of see anyone that sort of would, how can I put it, would fit the profile of, say, Nicole Kissinger and Chris Watts amongst those people there? I don't really see that. There's very few young men there. There's basically just one guy who's quite young and in fairly good shape. Otherwise, it looks like mostly housewives, and many of them elderly housewives, and sort of also older people. And what all of these people are selling, arguably to one another, but we could also make the argument to the public. They're selling the fact that they are thriving, that they are living the good life. And as soon as you put a patch on your chest or your arm or your elbow or your wrist or somewhere, as soon as you do that, you're thriving. You've got it made. You've got the lifestyle that you want. You instantly are a happy, blessed person, you know. And of course, that's what you're going to be saying whenever you go onto social media. And so the next thing that Shanann does is she posts sort of selfie after selfie after selfie with a lot of the people that are there. So this is Shanann and this person. This is Shanann and that person. This is Shanann and that person. So I don't know if there are 20 selfies, but they're a lot. They're easily a dozen. Basically saying, I'm thriving with this person, I'm thriving with that person. And so what kind of happens is Shanann gets to mix into their social media because they're going to be sharing it. And that's kind of really what happens is you might see 20 people there, but it's 20 people's social media. And that is really how they tried to sort of sell it, if that makes sense. Meanwhile, back in Colorado, Watts was with Kissinger at the Bandimere Speedway. Compare in your mind that, just if you close your eyes, compare in your mind the sights and sounds at the one event compared to the other. So imagine that you are you're sort of daydreaming or something. Maybe you drank a little bit too much or something, and you fell asleep where this local event was going to happen, right? And then these people start sort of entering this restaurant, and they start sort of chattering. Oh, I love your dress. Oh, I love your Thrive patch. Oh, I can see you've lost so much weight. It's amazing. Oh, this and that and whatever, and just sort of people chattering, right? Where do I sign up? Can I have a brochure? Do you want to go live with me? Whatever, right? Now imagine that, and then compare that to a crowd of, let's say, 10,000 or something, and these engines roaring like deafening roars, and this couple sort of sitting there, and maybe they're eating a hot dog, maybe they drinking beer, whatever, and every time these huge engines roar and race off, there's sort of burning flame and the smell of burning tire, and just incredible speed at which these powerful machines sort of burst down the track, kind of thing, right? And all I'm saying is just compare the difference. The one is at a much higher extreme than the other. The one is at a much greater intensity than the other. And that was what Chris Watts wanted. He wanted a more intense experience of life. He wanted this was his idea of an exciting weekend. His idea of an exciting weekend wasn't to go with Shanann somewhere and sort of go do a live video about how happy he is. This was the experience of being happy. And, the experience of being happy isn't saying you're happy. The experience of being happy isn't smiling for a camera or whatever. The experience of being happy is going somewhere, maybe with someone, doing something you enjoy, and feeling that rush of life within you. It's not something that you necessarily record, or it's something that you experience. On July 21st, we have confirmation, not that it's any big surprise, that Watts was also deleting a lot of the content on his device. So for the first time, something seems to be accelerating. In other words, the stakes seem to have gone up a tad on July 21st. And part of that is from the secret calculator app, where he's sort of hiding things away. And he's hiding things away that he wants to keep. He's not just hiding them away. He's not just putting them somewhere else. He desperately wants to hold on to this archive of experience, the sights and sounds. He wants to hold on to it. Interestingly, we don't have any images from Bandimere Speedway, not from Kissinger, not from Watts. But it was likely quite a vivid experience. And another thing just to bear in mind is Chris Watts is having an affair. He's going into a crowded stadium with someone that he likes a lot, but he's married. And it's kind of a risk. What if he bumped into a colleague there? What if he bumped into someone Shanann knew there? And what is happening here is the beginning of kind of brazenness and confidence, where he's doing things out in public and he's getting away with it, right? So let's go to the timeline itself. Watts and Kissinger went to Bandimere and the Rooftop Tavern in Morrison. At 07:43, Shanann called Watts and held a 20-minute conversation. That's quite a big deal. This time she called him later, around about 2 hours later than she would normally call him. bear in mind there's no record of them speaking to each other the previous day. So she calls him and she speaks to him for quite a long time, 20 minutes. Then about 2 or 3 hours later, but sometime later, mid-morning at 10:34, Watts transferred images again of Kissinger into his secret calculator application. So he's already starting to protect himself, to almost like guard his loins. He's sort of starting to hide things away in a systematic way. He's trying to... And why is he doing that? Is because he wants it to continue. He wouldn't be hiding something away if it was like, well, oh, okay, if she finds out it's over, that's fine. He wants to make sure that he can continue with Kissinger, and he knows the only way that's going to happen is if he hides things away. Now think about the analogy between hiding pictures away, hiding video away, hiding this experience away, hiding that experience away, and the hiding of the murders that eventually happened, the hiding of what really happened away. Can you see how it's a parallel? Can you see how it's kind of a similar thing? Can you also see how it's the strategy of hiding something kind of in plain sight? I mean, think about the oil tanks. They're in plain sight, but no one would imagine they're there, right? Think about even Shanann's grave. It's kind of in plain sight. It's you can sort of have line of sight over it and just not see it, right? Shanann was buried just beneath the surface of the soil. So that is kind of what is happening here. It's the beginning of these criminal impulses. They may not feel criminal at this point, but it's starting to escalate, it's starting to accumulate, it's starting to manifest into something. At 13:58, not found in Watts' phone, he sent a message to Shanann, headed out to the track, boo, I will text you when I get there, and then like a sort of a smiley face or some kind of face. So once again, you can see he's using the language that's supposed to soothe Shanann. She's supposed to think everything's fine, and based on this, she's going to be quite shocked when he arrives in North Carolina in about 10 days. She's going to be like, wow, this isn't the Chris Watts that I know. But actually the Chris Watts that she knew was already not the Chris Watts she knew weeks earlier, including here. And he was able to sort of pull the wool over her eyes by maintaining that those terms of endearment that she was used to, and telling her what she was used to hearing and in the way she was used to hearing it, and trying to make it seem as though nothing was happening. Of course, a lot was happening. Also bear in mind, he's not lying here. I think when he talks about going to the track, he is going to the track. He's just not saying everything. He's not saying who he's going with, right? So we don't know what his story was. We don't know what he actually said to Shanann, why he's going to the track, with who, or anything like that. We also don't know who Shanann, if Shanann spoke to someone and said, this is what my husband's doing today. We don't know whether she told her family and what they thought about that. And we also don't know when he was there whether he texted her and what he said, and did he send her photos. The phone data reviewer notes that with no mention of this, meaning the trip to Bandimere, in previous messages to Shanann, Watts likely provided a concocted ruse regarding his plans to visit the Speedway via an earlier phone call. Now, that's also something to bear in mind. We don't know what the concocted ruse is or was. It's missing. But the concocted ruse is another little example of, I'm going to do something I shouldn't be doing with someone I shouldn't be with, but I'm going to be able to do that by simply telling a little story. If I just tell this little story, I'm able to do what I want. If I convince you of a particular reality, I can continue doing whatever I want. And so look how that plays into the murder, where you say, I want to be with Nicole Kessinger. But what is everyone going to think? What are my parents going to think? What are her parents going to think? What are her friends going to think? It doesn't really matter. I'll just come up with a concocted ruse. I'll just come up with a little story, and they'll be fine with it. And a lot of people say, how did Watts think he would possibly get away with this? Well, because he'd gotten away with so many other deceptions. But the difference is, you can deceive your wife or your girlfriend or your children or someone in a situation like that, someone who likes you, someone who wants to give you the benefit of the doubt, right? Someone who's close to you. And over smallish matters, smallish. It's much harder to get away with deceptions when you are facing a FBI investigator or someone from the CBI or a detective who are used to dealing with liars and cheats. And usually when the police are summoned, something serious has happened. Not that somebody didn't take out the garbage or didn't clean the basement. That's not what the police are there to investigate. Police are to investigate, is someone really missing, and could it be worse than that? And it was. And Watts thought, oh, if I just say, they vanished, I think maybe she went to a friend. What, did he expect the police to sort of turn on their heel and head the other way? And that would be the end of it. At 18 hours to 2039. So let me just back up a second. I mentioned earlier that when in the history of people has there ever been a fairy tale divorce? Where's anyone like gotten divorced and was like, wow, what a fairy! It just went so smoothly. It was just so wonderful. And in the same way, that doesn't apply to a marriage. Where have you ever heard of a fairy tale marriage from beginning to end? There are some that are good marriages, but none of them are fairy tales. Even fairy tale marriages aren't fairy tales, like Princess Diana and Prince Charles, like their children, Prince William and Prince Harry, aren't leading fairy tale marriages or fairy tale lives. They'd like people to believe they are, but they're not. No one is. Fairy tales don't exist, but we all believe in them. And at this point, Chris Watts is starting to get caught up in his fairy tale, and that is why he's trying to maintain Shanann's fairy tale of him. He knows that he's actually putting Shanann into a nightmare. Before there's even a murder, he knows him cheating on Shanann while she's pregnant is a nightmare for her, but he's trying to pretend that she's still in a fairy tale. Does that make sense? Do you see how that psychology works? Do you see how that psychology joins things together and makes things fit? Right? At 1818 and 2039, Watts filmed clips of dragsters at Bandimere. So he was there for quite a long time. He was there from perhaps around about early afternoon. I'm not sure if he left early, but I think he also ate at a tavern. But that soaked up most of Saturday afternoon, and Shanann was really only busy in the middle period of it. So just as I don't know if Watts knew the time of the local, I don't know if he knew when it would end. I mean, we know that it would end at, was it 3 o'clock? Yes, so we know that it would end at 3 o'clock. More than likely, he knew as well. And so at 2 o'clock, he tells her, or just before 2 o'clock, he tells her, I'm going out, I'll text you when I get there. Which basically means he's warding off a situation where Shanann is finished with her event at like 3 o'clock, and then 4 o'clock she wants to contact him, 5 o'clock she wants to contact him, and maybe even 6, 7, 8 o'clock she wants to contact him. And what Watts does is he's trying to ward that off. He's trying to, as I say, keep Shanann in a fairy tale bubble so that he can stay in his fairy tale bubble and keep his mistress also in a fairy tale bubble as well. So anyway, in that evening, 1818 to 2039, using his phone, Watts filmed assorted clips of dragsters. The phone data review says, I recognized the Speedway images. And so it's quite a lot. It's these are image and movie files. It is 6199 to 6202. So that's 3 images, I guess. 3 or 4. 6199, 6200, 6201 and 6202. Then there's 7070 movie file. Then there's 7075 movie file, 7076 movie file, 7078 movie file, 7080 movie file. And of course, we haven't seen that. That is stuff that I think the CBI have, Weld County has. We haven't seen it. We haven't seen those images of what's at Bandimere with Kissinger. And it's kind of unfortunate because, as I say, we're missing the sights and sounds, that raw excitement that he was experiencing with Kissinger. We know exactly what Shanann was doing, and we know what that sounded like. It's I'm super excited about these patches. I just love the color and makes me feel amazing, kind of thing. And we know what it is. It's the same thing over and over and over again. The phone data review for July 21st concludes saying, throughout this time, Watts searched Google on topics like top fuel dragster burnout and top fuel dragster goes airborne. So it's quite interesting. I don't know whether Kissinger was asking him about it, but it just shows you that he was very interested in that, even while he was there. If you think about it, how many images and photos do you sort of see of that Watts has apparently taken? It's always Shanann took this photo, Shanann took that photo, Nicole Kissinger took a selfie. But you never sort of hear about Watts taking something, and nothing for his own edification or nothing for his own enjoyment. He's taking photos of the basement for Shanann or of the kids for Shanann, right? This is what he's doing for his own pleasure, for his own entertainment. This is him in his element. Watts sort of studied to be a NASCAR mechanic, and what is also happening in this moment is he's remembering who he wanted to be. He's also remembering who he wants to be. And I think there may be a little sense of maybe he's becoming that person. He's transforming his body. Can't he also transform who he is? Couldn't he do this? Couldn't he be someone else? And all of this spectacle around him is sort of tempting him out of his shell, tempting him into fairy tales. Okay, so based on what he said during his second confession, Watts was clearly having the time of his life with Kissinger, including on this day. Being with her here brought back fond childhood memories, as I mentioned. He had to feel a bitter resentment rising when he compared this happy, vivid reminiscing to Shanann causing havoc with his folks in North Carolina in terms of Nutgate. So can you imagine thinking about Bandimere and then sort of getting a message from Shanann, I heard from your father today, or don't expect me to speak to your mother, blah, blah, blah. Can you see how they're diametrically opposed? I'm not saying Shanann's not justified in saying it. I'm just saying this is the situation. At the same time, he felt she was costing him a fairy tale. Kissinger seemed to be offering him another, and he was tempted. So this is what I want you to try to concentrate on, is the idea that is maybe brewing in Watts' mind. And I'm not saying Watts is justified or is right or Shanann deserved to die or anything like that. I'm getting into the criminal mind. And I'm simply saying that the insight you get by doing that is to say, didn't he feel that Shanann was costing him a fairy tale? And I think the best way to express this is just to go into your own life. Weren't you ever with somebody who you felt like was costing you a fairy tale? Someone was holding you back from your fairy tale. Someone was preventing you from your fairy tale. Sometimes that fairy tale is somebody else. Sometimes it's something else. Sometimes it's a job or doing this or doing that. I think it happens a lot. And it's not necessarily that someone is to blame, but it can often feel like that. And sometimes to get your fairy tale, whatever it is, whatever this experience is that you want, you do sometimes need to leave another person, or they need to leave you. And in this case, Kissinger seemed to be offering him another, and he was tempted. Was she really? Was Kissinger really offering him another fairy tale? Sort of. She was offering him a chance to be himself. I don't know how long it would have lasted. You know, how long would she have wanted to be with a guy who had no money and who was caught up in a divorce thing? And, you know, also if he had to look after his baby all the time, how much would she really want to be? Remember, she doesn't have any children. How much would she want to sort of be dealing with that? How much would Kissinger want to be dealing with the nightmare of divorce, especially if it was just about to start? 1 year later, based on what's still on Watts' phone and what he deleted, it's obvious which life he preferred and what choice he was slowly gravitating towards. And this makes the irony of John Glatt's book, The Perfect Father, so strange, that it was obvious what Watts was hiding away and which life he preferred, and yet now in jail it's like, oh, I wish my children were still alive, I wish Shanann was still alive, I wish I could go back to my life. Really? I mean, isn't what's really going on that Watts wishes he'd gotten away with it, or wishes that he could be with Kissinger, wishes he could have one more experience with Kissinger, wishes things had worked out with Kissinger? Isn't that what he actually wishes? And what he's showing to the world is another front. It's yet another version of showing the world what he thinks the world wants to hear, which is, I wish I still had my family. No, I don't still love Kissinger. I don't still think about her. I don't fantasize her. I don't think fondly of her. I think fondly of my wife who I was going to divorce. I think fondly of my unborn child that I said over and over again I don't want. And a way to kind of really imagine this is, can you imagine two people who are about to get divorced, and then they do get divorced, and then the husband kind of says, now they're divorced, the husband says, but they chose to get divorced. And then the husband says, sure, wow, I really miss my wife. She was such a great lady, and I really miss my children. They, but what happened to all those arguments about, I definitely have to divorce you, I don't care about the children, or I do care about the children, but I don't care about you, or I just have to do this for myself. And then after they get divorced, wow, what a wonderful lady that person was, or what a nice guy that was, like I really liked him. That's not often how divorces go. That's the fairy tale version of divorce, and not even that is a fairy tale. Divorcing someone and then missing them. And that is what people are that is what Chris Watts is sort of presenting with this, is that because the murders were effectively a divorce. The murders were effectively permanently separating from his family. And now he's saying afterwards, I miss the way Shanann cooked, and I miss the children, and I wish it was back to the way things were. Really? Do you believe him? I know there are people that do, and there are also people who believe his first, second, and third confession. Chris Watts is a liar, is a two-face. So very little of what he says is true, but a little bit of what he says is true. And the trick is knowing what is and what isn't. How do you know? How do you know the trick between what is true and what isn't? Well, part of that is knowing the psychology of this guy to begin with. And if you interpret that through him being a narcissist, you're going to say, yeah, he just wanted everything for himself. He was a selfish guy. He only thought of himself. And that's kind of how you're going to interpret everything. But it's not going to make a lot of sense, actually, when you do that. In other words, trying to figure out what's true and what's not through the narcissism prism is going to give you a certain results. Trying to do the same through the introversion prism is going to give you totally different results. And that is what makes True Crime Rocket Science quite a unique voice in talking about the Watts case, analyzing the Watts case. On the 27th of August 2018, so this is after everything happened, Madeleine St. Armour put up a tweet from the Times Call. No matter what you find out, it will never make it understandable. It will never make it okay. And this is apparently a message said in Frederick. And that's of course true. It will never make it okay, obviously. It will never make, no crime is ever made okay through understanding it, through analysis or any of that. What we're trying to understand is human psychology, criminal psychology, human behavior, and motives. What we're trying to do is see if we have the discernment to figure out reality. And it's never going to be okay, but it is important to find out. And I think what my research has shown, what my many books have shown, is how hard it is to find our way to reality when there are so many opportunities for deception. I'm talking about besides Chris Watts and the people involved. I'm talking about the commentators who are also opportunists, who are also in some cases charlatans and crooks. It's very hard to get to the truth, because sometimes there's not an incentive in getting to the truth. Sometimes there's more an incentive in the shock value or the tabloid value in embellishing the truth, making it worse than it really is, or making it different to what it really is, in telling people what they want to hear. And this telling people what they want to hear, which Chris Watts did, which Shanann did in a way in her promotions, telling people, well, I want to hear that this is a good product. I want to hear that it's, gives you everything you would ever want. I want to hear that. It's the same thing some people do, some salespeople do. So people think, what do people want to hear? What would be popular? And that's the story they tell. They don't tell the less popular story that's nevertheless reality. The hard to find truth, the hard to find reality. This is what True Crime Rocket Science tries to do, not only with this case, but with others as well. I caught a lot of flack in the Stephen Avery case because I didn't agree with the popular narrative that he was innocent. I didn't agree with the popular making a murder narrative that he framed the cops, or the cops were framed, or something like that. He didn't have an alibi. So True Crime Rocket Science isn't about winning popularity contests. It's about being the most authentic voice in true crime. Once again, I want to thank the couple of people who've signed up to Patreon. There just seems to be a constant stream moving over from YouTube. Thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier, this series will move to Patreon under the $1 tier on by the end of the week, so around about Friday. I might put up a teaser on Saturday, but after that it will all be on Patreon on the $1 tier. On the $5 tier are audiobooks, and on the $10 tier longer audiobooks. Thank you for listening. I'm going to leave you with some sights and sounds from Bandimere Speedway.
Bandimere Speedway, that's the fastest speed in the history of this place.
Rocket Man's about ready to go. Imagine the nerves, the butterfly, the anxiety that Tabul must be feeling right now. No way to shut this motorcycle off once he starts. Listen to that wind too, ladies and gentlemen. Perhaps Eric waiting for the wind to die down just a little bit. It's been on and off. Here we go. The countdown. .558, 223 miles an hour. 558.
Wow.
Unbelievable, ladies and gentlemen. 558, 223 in the win.